Okay, the recording has started. All right, so we'll get right into it. Quite a bit on the payroll standardization update for this time. If you recall, we held a live Q&A on last week about questions that people might have had for their vendor selection that's due today. And I think about 30 people attended. Very good, very thoughtful questions. Commissioner Vino was in attendance and answered questions, not answered questions. So I think that went well. If any of you attended, do you have any feedback about it? Did you like it? Didn't like it? Want more of it? All right. Hearing none, we'll keep moving along. Next, I would like to talk about our. Kim put in the chat she liked it, so that's good. Thank you, Kim. So we'll move on to the next item, which is about the Excel reports. And thank you, Pam. Love it. Answered my questions. Liked it. Good. The debrief of Excel report. So if you recall, the last time we met, I asked for people, regardless of what stage they were and how they did their payroll, to try to prepare a sample report for us in Excel. And we had about 50% of pilot counties to submit those. So thank you to the counties who took the time and exerted the effort to do it. I talked with some of you along the way. Boyd, Carter, Fayette, Graves, Pulaski, Union, and Wolf. Thank you all so very much. I'm going to pull up a redacted version of the Boyd County report so I can show you all the caliber of the reports that we received. Almost all of them were spot on, just like this one. And it was encouraging for me to see that, even if it took a couple of questions, that folks were able to create the reports. Can everybody see the report there?
Yes.
Okay. So as you can see, I have redacted this so that it doesn't contain any personal information or employee names. But this is the Boyd County one, and it is representative of what we received from all the counties who did participate in that. And so you see at the top, it talks about the number of employees, child support, just a listing of employees with job titles. And then, of course, these numbers were filled in. And then the number of hours as it went across all of the fields. And people filled that in for us and divided their employees by their classification. So this is almost exactly what we got from everyone who participated. And this was very helpful in developing what the final report should look like, for me getting feedback from those of you who did ask to help with figuring out how to explain it when other people asked. So that was good. We worked out the language there. And then we did use that to come up with the final payroll format with the cases team. And so I'm going to share that with you now. This is going to be the final format. You'll see that it's not substantially different, but through the process with you guys in the pilot, we kind of eliminated some things we didn't need. We found out some things we should say in a different way. And so this looks a little different than what you had before, but this is going to be what the final one is. I'll go over this with you today. So you get as I promised, pilot group gets a little advance notice on everything. This will start to go out with to everybody else a little bit later in the month, but you guys are getting a sneak peek today. So this is what we'll ultimately be asking for from your vendors. And the first, it is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's going to have 4 sheet tabs on it across the bottom. The first one is an employee tab. So you see we're asking for county name, the month that it is, and the total number of employees. And then the vendor employee ID. So I've talked with some people over the last few weeks and they don't use the employee ID in their office, and that's okay. Once you implement with your vendor, there will be an employee ID that is used, and that is to anchor the employee for communication purposes, so that when information is received, it's a secondary way other than name to verify that we're all talking about the same person. And so if you don't already have those, that's okay. They'll be created during your vendor implementation process. So first, middle, and last name, original hire dates would be in here, the last day of work if they had been terminated, for example. So all these fields would be filled out. And the only time a terminated employee would come up on here is the last time they were to be paid. And so that's just, it's there to tell the system that this person won't be paid anymore. So that only comes up when somebody is terminated. But the field has to be there all the time so that when you do need to use it, it's available and the computer is prepared to accept it. But it can be blank at any time when it doesn't apply. These got off. Let me fix that. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So that's why these are over there. Huh. I looked at this a few minutes ago and didn't notice that. I'll fix that in a minute, but permanently. So current status, exempt, non-exempt. Please remember that this exempt, non-exempt is a classification status that is determined by the U.S. Department of Labor regulations. So, you know, I'm sure all of you have been employers for a while and you know this, but if you're going to be changing anything, which some people have indicated to me that they might be going to salary or hourly or changing that, just make sure that you follow those regulations for your own sake. And there's a great guide on the U.S. Department of Labor website. And then whether they're full-time or part-time, if they have another employer, I don't know what's going on with my display here. Everything is off by a column, so I don't know what happened. Huh. Bizarre. Okay, that's the way it should look. Previous employee rate, current rate, the date that it changed, what their position is, whether they're hourly or salary, if there's an overtime rate that applies, average hours worked, and this is this average hours worked is calculated by the system, and it determines whether or not benefits can be reimbursed under the reimbursement system. So that's what that number is used for. That is a DGA request for that to be there. And then you would put in whatever retirement system they participate in. So this is going to be what's called the employee information. And so this information will come from your vendor into the MDPS system, and this is the information that the MDPS system will read first. And so first it will check to make sure that all the employees you say are working this month are the same employees that we have in our system. So that's the first way it will receive the information. The next, it will go to the payroll information sheet. Again, duplicated. It's the county name, the month, the total number, and then it populates the gross pay amount. And then these are the calculations that would come from the payroll vendor system or the CPA. And these would be filled in appropriately across based on, you know, those equations that are plugged in to the software. And it's vendor ID again. So it's another way of making sure we have the right person. Gross pay, number of hours, the rate here for an hourly employee, and the salary here for a monthly employee. And then if there was any overtime, and then you see here ER, FICA, ER, KERS, ERS, ERS. So that is what the employer pays. So that's all that we need to capture here for payroll. And that is because what we're looking at is what's actually coming out of your budget versus what the employee receives in their bank account. Bob, I see your hands up.
Yeah, yes. I want to make sure that you all understand that when you're talking about average hours worked per month and whether or not that results in reimbursement, if we have employees that are also PAC employees, They don't have to be over 100 hours a month here for us to pay benefits. I mean, I have to pay retirement regardless, as long as they're full-time in PAC, which is 100 hours a month minimum. So I just want to make sure that that's understood.
So DGA is using this number, and I don't want to mischaracterize what she said, but my understanding is that that has to do with what is reimbursed by CSE, not whether or not you have to pay retirement. Lily, is Lily here? Did I characterize that properly? I do not want to misspeak on what that is. I just know that that's what they asked for. But I've written it down and I can double check it. I don't think that it has anything to do with whether or not you have to pay. That's not what that number is there for.
Well, I understand, but I want to be reimbursed for it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. As far as I understand, that is what I'm able to answer right now. I have written down your concern. Lily would be able to explain it better, but it doesn't look like she's on the call right now. So I'll have to get back to you.
Thank you.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then coming across here, so the employer payments that are here, if anybody happens to participate in other retirement systems, that is an option and available. And then you can put in what you paid for unemployment insurance, for workers' compensation, and then other insurances, medical, dental, vision, life, and then anything else, right? So these are all here. And the other here would encompass other deductions that you paid on behalf of the employee, not that the employee paid. So this report is not going to capture whether or not you sent money to their garnishment or whatever the case may be. That's not what this report is for. This report is for what the employer, your office, has paid out. Any other questions about this one? Something in the chat. I'm going to read that really quickly. So Kim, you said we would like to know. I'll distribute the answer to everyone. All right. So then the next document tab is a CS21 employee summary. And so you'll note that this looks pretty much the same as the CS21 with the exception of it not being for a single employee with the days of the month, but it is a summary of the month for each employee. So you see at the top, your county name would go up here, the month and year goes here, and then all of your employees' summary data would be here. And so it'll show their employee ID again for identification purposes, the total number of 40 hours worked for the month, how many were training, how many were leave, and if there were leave, what type of leave it was. And so that's just filled in from your payroll calculations into this report with the total number of hours. There'll be a line for each employee that currently would use a CS21. Okay. Then, any questions about that? The CS21 summary document? Stacey, I think you're muted. Sorry, I couldn't see your hand there. You're still muted. Still can't hear you. Okay, she's going to type it in the chat. So let me take a look over there. This is the document that is being created by our vendor, right? Yes. It cannot be done yourself. So this has to come from your vendor. So if your vendor is payroll partners, they're going to create this. If your vendor is your CPA, then they are going to create this. So the information and where the information comes from depends on how you've chosen to do timekeeping in your office. Okay. Whether you're using the electronic 2121 ones or whether you're using a timekeeping and time tracking electronic timekeeping, time tracking software. But that's where the information comes from. But this report, the whole thing, all 4 of these tabs that we're going over right now, must come from your vendor, whether your vendor is a company or whether your vendor is a CPA. It cannot come from you directly. All right, so then the next one is the 21-1. So this is the attorney one. It looks very much the same. Again, it is not a day of the month. It is a summary of the whole month for each one. And we're doing the same thing we did before. County, month and year, name, ID number, 40 hours worked, administrative time, court time, total time, right? It'll be like this for each attorney in your office. Just note that this is a summary report for what is being paid out. This does not satisfy the requirement for the log that specifies what you're doing, on which case you're working on. And so how you capture that information, whether you use a typed log that you keep in your office, or you're doing it through an electronic timekeeping, time tracking, in this case it's time tracking service, either way, that still will need to be uploaded as documentation separate from this report, because this report is just what is used to create the numbers on your invoice. It is not all of the supporting documentation that might be required. So what supporting documentation is required? To be uploaded into MDPS, attorneys will still have to put in their logs that say exactly what case and what type of activity they were doing. Employees, if you're not using an electronic timekeeping service, you'll have to upload your signed CS21 forms, but those will have to be typed. We're going to send out a clear Excel version of those to you. For those of you who are still going to use those, we'll send that out to you. You'll have to fill it in throughout the month. At the end of the month, you'll print it and you'll have to put your signature on it. And then those can be uploaded as a batch into supporting documentation. If you are using electronic timekeeping, then all of that information is captured in the vendor and is available in the vendor and will not need to be uploaded separately. There will be a separate, just a blanket timekeeping report that will be uploaded from the vendor the same way that the 21s are uploaded. All right, any questions about this? So as I mentioned, this is the final version that we came to based on feedback during your process. So again, thank you for creating those with us. And you guys are getting this information early because you're part of the pilot. Everybody else will start to see this towards the end of the month. And we'll discuss that timeline right now if there aren't any other questions at the moment. Okay, great. Okay. Question. Not sure if this is correct time, but how would these reports line up with monthly billing? So these reports will be received on the last day of every month, and they are used to create the payroll portion of your monthly invoice. So when the first working day of the month, when you come in and log into MDPS, your invoice with the payroll request for reimbursement will already be filled in and ready for you to add any direct costs onto and then submit. Did that answer it? Okay. I'm not sure what you're asking me then. So if you don't mind, let's set up a time to talk offline to figure out, so I can better understand what you're asking. And then if it applies broadly to everyone, I'll add it to the FAQs. Anybody else have questions right now? But we're going to talk about that right now, Bob. He asked, will you be getting this info to our vendors, or are we to do it? We're getting to that timeline right now. All right, so I'm going to skip number 4 for just a moment, just so that we can keep all this relevant. I probably should have ordered it differently. I'm going to skip down to 6, which is the timeline, and then we'll come back to these others. This is what I anticipate the timeline will be leading us into the fiscal year in terms of payroll standardization. So as you know, vendor selections are due today by 5 o'clock, whatever your local time is. Starting tomorrow morning, I will start to review the responses, make sure everything is complete that we need, clean it up, make it look organized and everything, compiling the data. And then for those of you who have already started filling it out, you know that there is a question on there that what is your estimated annual cost? For those of you who filled it out before I added that question, I would have sent you an email asking for that information. But as I review all of it, I'll make sure that everything is complete. Once I have that complete cost information, I'll be forwarding it to Lily so that she can use it to make sure that your fiscal year 22 budgets are increased to cover the costs that you put there. Then starting between, so that gives me about 4 or 5 days to get all the information compiled and cleaned up and get answers to anything that might have been left blank by anyone. So then we'll be setting up meetings with you or a representative from your office and your vendors. So when I go through and compile the data, I'll be setting up, these are the number of people using payroll partners. These are the people using ADP, and so on and so forth. And then I'll say, sometime between April 20th and May 10th, I will ask for everybody to be in a meeting where we discuss these specifications and it's provided to your vendor. If you feel like you want to provide it to your vendor ahead of time, you can do that as soon as I distribute it. But I will be doing that in these meetings between April 20th and 5/10. So I hope that answers your question, Bob. Then we will have a technical meeting. So that'll give the vendors a few days to be thinking about their internal processes. I'll ask questions about technical specifications. We will schedule meetings with vendors between May 11th and May 29th to talk about the coding or programming or process required for the communication of the report to MDPS. And so the IT folks will be involved in that conversation so that we get that technical pathway set up properly, so that if there's anything we need to do on the MDPS end, if there's anything that needs to be done on the vendor end, we know what that is and can start working on it during that time. So those meetings will occur between 5/11 and 5/29, and they're occurring during that time frame because the lead programmer in cases is out of the office until May 10th. So that's why we need to wait to do it during this time frame. But I think that's good because it gives everybody time to kind of settle in and get comfortable with the information before we talk about just the communication channel. So then that gives June and July to start the implementation process if you hadn't already started to do so with your vendor. Remember, the actual time that we require for you to start using your vendor is July 1. But you have that whole month of June to try to get things set up, to talk about it and things of that nature, ask questions. We will be running tests as soon as pilot group members get through C and D. We're going to start running tests with you guys throughout the month of June. We'll be testing training. We'll be providing training to pilot group and everyone else throughout the month of June to make sure we're all ready to go on July 1. We've already started talking about how those trainings are going to roll out. They will be they'll be recorded with step-by-step instructions so that you can capture them. You can watch them the first time and ask questions there, but then you can go back and review it and look at it, and there'll be attachments that you can look at and keep as well. And then, of course, we're always here to support as you have questions. You will also be using this time in June and July to understand how to use your vendor software if you're not accustomed to using it already. So there will likely be training on that end of the spectrum as well, so that you're comfortable and your staff are comfortable with entering whatever they'll need to enter with that new system if it's new to you. Then July 1, as I mentioned, we'll start the payroll schedule transition if you hadn't already started it. If you recall, the payroll schedule transition plans, sample plans were put out. Some people are doing something a little different. Some people are following those examples exactly. However you get to it, by the July 30th paycheck, everyone should be on the new payroll schedule. So you can use the examples that were provided. You can do it a different way if you'd like, but by July 30th, everyone will need to be on that schedule. Okay. Then for the August 1st invoice, we will have you submit this report. So what will happen is that the report can be created by your vendor, but we're going to need you to submit it manually as you submit now. And that is for cases for their timeline with the IT. So pilot, you guys might be using the test environment through that point. Your actual invoice will be manually uploaded as usual for your August 1st invoice. Be created the same way you do it now. For your September invoice, that's going to be the first time that it is a fully automated process. Okay. So that gives us truly from June to September 1st as a unit to work through all this and get it, try to work out the kinks as best as possible. But again, if you remember what I said, we're all reasonable. We're all going to have a growth mindset. As it says here, subject to change. If things come up, if there are problems, as long as everyone's communicating, everyone's going to be reasonable about this. So, but I ask for good faith effort from everyone, and we'll adjust if we need to. Any questions about this timeline? All right. Okay, so let's go back up here to 4 and 5. I did provide an opportunity for people to give feedback about creating the reports. I did not see any responses in there. I hope that was accurate. If you think you responded and it wasn't in there, let me know. But I didn't see any responses in there. But I mentioned some successes. I think it's fantastic for the half of the pilot participants who did submit an invoice, a report to me, which I think is a great success. I think it's also a great success that we finally came to an understanding so that our cases folks can code this, and we're basically on schedule so that we can start this the way that we wanted to. I think it's a great success that people are finalizing their vendor selections through today. Some people already have. Would anyone else like to share a success as it relates to this payroll transition? Anybody have any? No one? No one? Okay, Stacy said it hasn't popped up on my computer, but it popped up on my phone. Oh, there it is on my computer. Stacy says, I found a new vendor thanks to presentations. Well, good. So hopefully it'll save you money and give you more service. Hopefully that's, the plan, and that's great. Anytime you can get more for your buck is a good thing. More bang for your buck. Pam says, we'll finally be getting direct deposits, smiley face, which is good. That's always good. Faster pay, no matter who you are, is a great thing. Well, if you think of any other successes, please just drop those in the chat. But then now we'll move on to opportunities. And I phrase these as opportunities for improvements, not negatives, not things that you hate, but things that have made you think so that there's an opportunity for improvement. So does anybody have any of those? For example, through the process working with you guys to get the report, I saw where some things were not clear in the way I was explaining them. I saw where there's some information we'd initially asked for that really wasn't necessary. So I was able to take that information out and rethink the way I explained some of the specifications. So those are the types of opportunities we're thinking about. I also, working with other people's calendars and schedules and hearing where there were difficulties, it was an opportunity to expand and adjust the timeline a little bit so that people could be comfortable going into this. Can anybody else think of any opportunities that we have at this point? All right, if you think of any, you can still submit into that survey. It's still open if you want to do it anonymously, or if you don't want to do it here in front of everyone, please send me an email. That survey is still open. I'm listening. We're listening. So now's the time. All right, moving on. I want to give you an update on direct pay of office supplies. If you all recall, part of phase one of the invoicing project here was to include a transition to direct pay for office supplies. We have been working with DGPO, which is the Department for, it's procurement. That's what it is. Those other letters are in there too. But it's the procurement office who sets up those sorts of arrangements for direct pay by agencies with state vendors. So in this case, the office supply vendor is Cardinal. And we have been talking about how to set that up so that it eases up budgets a little bit and streamline the process. Through that conversation and working through it, just like we have been with the payroll transition, this is where we are now. We talked with the procurement, we talked with different county attorney offices, we talked with the county attorney work group, and this is where we are at this point. So we would like to run a pilot program for 3 county attorney locations, 1 small, 1 medium, and 1 large. We already have had Kenton and Madison counties volunteer, so I'd like to have 1 more county volunteer to be a part of the pilot program for direct payment of office supplies. And what that would entail is starting October 1 and for 3 months, we would provide you with the information and training that you need to use the system that we are anticipating will be the one to use for direct payment of office supplies ultimately. And so you would essentially order what you needed from Cardinal, and then there is a procurement process that must occur, which involves someone in child support enforcement who is the Pro Card holder, which is how we'll pay for it. It's kind of like a business credit card. The Pro Card holder, to make sure that the order that's being requested, it meets the requirements, and then there's someone in procurement who does the same, and then the order is released. It's paid for on our Pro Card. Then you'll receive the information, and we'll be working out the process during this 3-month pilot for how that is reflected in budgets, how that is, how documentation and supporting information is uploaded into MDPS, where the records are going to be maintained. So that is the purpose of the pilot, for us to work those things out. We'll also be looking at any other considerations related to this, such as cost, efficiency, so on and so forth, so that we can make any tweaks, changes, updates, and so on during the 3-month pilot period. So then starting around January of 22, if your county wants to participate, you will have the opportunity to do so at this point. That's what we're anticipating. If you want to do it in January of 22, you can, but it has been determined that it will not be a full program for everyone, a required program for direct office supplies until the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that part of the project has already been, the date has already shifted for it. But if the pilot goes well, we will go ahead and extend it to anyone who would like to participate in January, that they will be able to participate in January. And those people that do participate, that'll also help give us more data and work out any additional issues that we might need to. But we're anticipating it starting to be part of the full program in July 1 of 22. Any questions about that? So if you are interested in piloting that with us, one other county would be fantastic. You can send me an email so that I can get you on the list and start to include you with the information as it becomes available. It's not something, obviously, it's not going to start till October 1, so you may not hear a whole lot about it right in this immediate future because we're going to be focusing on payroll standardization. But if you're interested in doing it, I'll get your name on the list so that to make sure that you're included as we go along. Okay, so now we just need to go back up here for this last bit. There is one thing that I would like to ask for everyone to do. Cases has requested that those of you here in the pilot group, if you could go into MIP now and update all of your employee data. Many of you may already have perfectly updated employee data in MIP, and if you do, fantastic, then you don't have to do anything. But in the event that you don't, we would like for you to make sure that if there's somebody who doesn't work for you anymore, make sure their employment end date is entered in MIP. If there's somebody who is whose deductions have changed or their elections are different than what you can see in MIP, that you update and change all of that. And the reason for this ask by cases is that as we move into testing for the payroll standardization and document transfers and things of this nature, we want to have data that comes directly from you as opposed to from the vendor so that we can make sure that things update the way you want to, and there's a check during this testing phase. And then also they'll use it for making some other adjustments to how data looks on the screen, and if we move it, to make sure that it all gets where it's supposed to be. So that is what I'd like for you to do. Whoever your MIP user is, go in, make sure all the employee data that's in MIP now is correct and accurate. Any questions about that? And if you have questions or problems with it as you go along, please just reach out to me so that I can assist. And that will need to be completed by May 12th. All right. So that's all I had today. Didn't quite run an hour. Does anyone have questions, comments, concerns, discussion topics? All right. So I have on my list here that I need to get back regarding Bob Neese's question on the average hours per month worked, how that number is actually used in terms of reimbursement for those costs. And I will find that out for you, get it back to get the response out as soon as I can. And then also Kim Lindsay in Graves County will be reaching out to talk about your question. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order today? Okay, so our next meeting, you're welcome. Our next meeting will be Thursday, May 13th at 11 Eastern, 10 Central. So the invite will be coming for that shortly, but you can go ahead and mark your calendars if you'd like. And then I will send out these minutes once I have the answers so that you'll have this information at your fingertips to refer to. But of course, it'll all be communicated as it becomes relevant. So thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it. Enjoy the sunshine, even if it is a bit chilly, and we'll see you next time. Bye.